Hey guys, it's me, Seren, back with another video. Today's video is a really important woman named Johnnie Tillmon, who was born 1926 and died 1995 and was a welfare rights activist. Born Johnnie Lee Percy in Scarlet, Arkansas, She was a migrant sharecropper's daughter whose mother died in childbirth when Johnnie was 5 years old. Working in the cotton fields of rural Arkansas from the age of 7, Tillmon was known as feisty and self-reliant by her family. In 1948, she married James Tillmon, and although they had 6 children, she left him in 1952 because of his running around, aka his cheating. She moved to California in 1959, settling in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles where her brothers lived, and became involved in local activism as a union shop steward in the Compton laundry where she worked. Tillmon also organized workers, registered black voters for local California elections, and became involved in a community association called the Nickerson Garden Planning Organization, which was established to improve living conditions in the housing projects where she lived. In 1963, Tillmon fell ill with tonsillitis, and after being hospitalized, she was forced to get on welfare while she recovered, as she could not work and provide for her 6 children. Tillmon grew to despise the welfare caseworkers who disrespected, dehumanized, and mistreated her as a poor black woman. They kept tabs on everything from her refrigerator to her comings and goings, threatening to cut off aid for alleged transgressions like dating or even having a man's clothes in her washing machine. And just so you guys know, this was due to what was called the man in the house rule, which was a rule that said that if you had a man in the house, you could not receive government aid. So even if you were the poorest of poor, even if you, your husband, and your kids were the poorest of poor, if you had a man in your house, you could not receive government aid. You had to kick the man out of the house to get the aid. This rule was used to actively break apart the nuclear black family. For any of you that didn't know, that is a fact. Jack. Tillmon and many other black women were also pushed by caseworkers to get their tubes tied due to the racist propaganda of the welfare queen, despite the fact that the majority of welfare recipients were white women. So let me just give you guys a little bit of history on welfare. Welfare wasn't supposed to go to black single mothers. Aid to Dependent Children, or ADC, which was an early version of welfare, was passed as part of the Social Security Act of 1935. It was meant for widows and deserted wives who had lost their husband's wages through no fault of their own, and no one expected these women to work. It was assumed that they'd stay home and take care of their children. Yet black women, who were then mostly living in the South, were expected to work, usually as maids and field hands, and the ADC bill specifically excluded domestic and farm workers, including women. More white women than black women have always received welfare, and even after extended benefits to black women during the 1940s and 1950s, many southern states stopped issuing welfare checks during cotton picking season. Political propaganda was used to spread the idea of the welfare queen as a black woman when welfare queens were white. Fed up with the degradation, Tillmon sent notes to every woman in her housing project on welfare, asking them to discuss their lease and benefits. 300 women showed up to the Nickerson Garden Planning Organization headquarters to discuss their poor treatment. Tillmon organized them, traveling to other housing projects to pull more women together, and within 8 months, she had founded one of the first welfare rights groups in the country. The women called themselves Aid to Needy Children, ANC, Mothers Anonymous, and by August 1963, they had opened an office staffed by welfare recipients who helped others fight back against welfare bureaucracy, get special grants, and give their children food, clothes, and shelter. They won millions of dollars for women and children's medical services and also helped create the food voucher program known as WIC for women, infants, and children. They also worked with civil rights lawyers to eventually strike down the no man in the house rule. ANC Mothers Anonymous later became part of the National Welfare Rights Organization, with Tillmon serving as the first chair of the NWRO, National Welfare Rights Organization, obviously NWRO. In 1972, she became its executive director when NWRO founder George Wiley resigned. That same year, Tillmon penned a groundbreaking essay, Welfare is a Woman's Issue, which was published in Ms. Magazine and emphasized women's rights to adequate income, regardless of whether they worked in a factory or at home raising children. Tillmon's work clashed with the predominant ideology of white feminism, which demanded equal work and pay outside of the home. Tillmon fought for equal pay even for domestic work of mothers in the home, which disgusted middle-class white feminists who felt they fought for liberation outside of the domestic work that was primarily done by Black women. And let me also say that this reminds me of Dorothy Bolden, who I did a Hidden Figures on, who also fought for the rights of domestic workers. Mainstream white feminism has always centered young, rich, working white women, while poor Black women who were older, who were mothers, or who worked as domestics had to really fend for ourselves. You know, the NWRO did not agree with the mainstream feminist ideas about marriage, birth control, and abortion, as Black women were already subjugated by the state about their relationships, bodies, and fertility under the no man in the house rule. Tillmon and the NWRO felt they fought for equal pay for all, which would enable women to have the choice to work or stay home. Mainstream white feminists of the time criticized that as a hollow choice. And I just feel like this is another example of white women just messing it up for everybody. Johnnie Tillmon was talking about essentially a universal basic income in 1972, and the white girl said no. Tillmon later expanded on the idea of adequate income for all as head of the National Welfare Rights Organization, focusing less on welfare rights and pushing instead for a guaranteed minimum income for all in the United States. The National Welfare Rights Organization impressed the leaders of the civil rights movement and influenced Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to become involved in the economic issues that later informed his activism. In 1967, at a speech at Stanford University, King declared, "It seems to me that the civil rights movement must now begin to organize for the guaranteed annual income." When King was planning the Poor People's Campaign in 1968, he sought the NWRO and Johnnie Tillmon's endorsement. The push for a guaranteed minimum income yielded results in 1969 when the White House announced the Family Assistance Plan, which pushed for a guaranteed income for families below the poverty line. The lump sum would not be discontinued even if family members worked, and recipients would not be subjected to caseworkers questioning if a man was in the household or the number of children a family had. A week after the announcement, polls found that 2/3 of the nation, Republicans as well as Democrats, supported the plan, which got through the House of Representatives but died in the Senate Finance Committee. Tillmon and the National Welfare Rights Organization also utilized direct action protest methods in addition to writing essays, giving speeches, and creating nonviolent marches. They occupied welfare offices and refused to leave, tearing phones off walls and overturning filing cabinets that held welfare case files. The National Union of the Homeless later used what was called a Johnnie Tillmon model of organizing, named after her. These direct methods proved troubling to financial backers at the time, who pulled out of their funding, and by March 1975, the NWRO was forced to shut down due to bankruptcy. After the NWRO went under in 1975, Tillmon continued fighting for welfare rights and adequate income for all at both the local and state level. She died in Los Angeles in 1995 at the age of 69. And I'm just going to read you guys some quotes from Johnnie Tillmon. She had a lot of really powerful quotes. "The ladies of NWRO are the frontline troops of women's freedom, both because we have so few illusions and because our issues are so important to all women. The right to a living wage for women's work and the right to life itself. I'm a woman. I'm a Black woman. I'm a poor woman. I'm a fat woman. I'm a middle-aged woman. And I'm on welfare. In this country, if you're any one of those things, you count as less of a human being. If you're all of those things, you don't count at all." Johnnie Tillmon, a hidden figure. Tons of links and information will be in the description box. Please read more about Johnnie Tillmon. She was really amazing and incredible, and a lot of what we hear talked about right now in terms of a universal basic income came from her work and the work that she did with the National Welfare Rights Organization. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Food for thought as always. See you guys next time. Peace.